Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So there's a lot of speculation going on about how elections are going to take place in this environment. Obviously, the government of Ohio just suspended the Democratic primaries that were due to happen today. We've seen suspensions of other primaries, the Louisiana Democratic primary. So what exactly could the effect be on our national elections as we move forward toward November? Joining us on the line to discuss is Hans von Spakowski. He's manager of the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Initiative and senior legal fellow at the Mies Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Hans, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Sure, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So there are a lot of wild rumors flying around that President Trump might do something to suspend the election in November. What actual powers does the federal government have to suspend the elections? How would that actually happen if it were to happen? What are the possibilities? I think pretty slim.
Well, the president and the executive branch have absolutely no authority whatsoever, neither under the Constitution nor under federal law. The only body that could change the date of the November election is Congress. Congress, under the Constitution, has the authority to set the date for congressional elections for the Senate and the House, and also the ability to set the date for the election of our electors who then cast the vote for president. And through federal law, they have, for many years, long time, set the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And that's why the only way the calendar could change is if Congress passed a bill that amended that law and it was signed by the president. Unless that happens, coronavirus or no coronavirus, we're having an election on November 3rd.
So why do you think all of these rumors are circulating, given the fact that obviously none of this is actually going to materialize?
Look, I've gotten calls from various reporters, and their, frankly, ignorance of the Constitution and federal law on this is profound and can't be overestimated.
Now, as we move forward with these elections, one of the things that's becoming clearer is that, in-person elections, let's say that future pandemics happen, future elections could be affected by this sort of thing. Do you think that we're going to see an increase, Hans, in the amount of pressure for online voting or early voting? It's been a very weird election cycle in that sense, because you've had a bunch of primaries where people voted for candidates who are no longer on the ballots in primaries thanks to absentee voting and early voting. At the same time, we now have all of this pressure to actually absentee vote or early vote or online vote, given the risks of actually being in public with other human beings. What do you see as the future of how voting is going to take place?
See, I don't think, look, I think once we get over this pandemic, I think things will go back to normal. About 2/3 of the states have early voting. It's not a good idea for the very reason you just said, which is there are literally hundreds of thousands of voters whose vote was a waste of time in the states that have already had primaries because they sent their vote in early, and by the time the election day had rolled around, those candidates had dropped out of the race and they couldn't take their ballot back. Look, in every state you can vote by absentee ballot. I think that's what may happen in the upcoming primaries. Online voting, I don't think we're going to go there. Every major group that has looked at this, including the National Science Foundation, has recommended against online voting because they say the security problems over the internet are too massive to be able to overcome to actually have safe elections.
Now, Hans, to change topics briefly, one of the topics obviously has become very hot lately is what the capacities are of local and state governments to shut down so many businesses and so much of American public life during a pandemic like this one. And a lot of people have been wondering about what are the limitations here? What exactly are local and state governments allowed to do? What kind of authority does the federal government have in declaring a national emergency to actually help lock down all of these areas? I know a lot of civil libertarians are quite concerned about the possibility of the government overthrowing all boundaries under these circumstances. So what kind of powers do local and state governments have, and when should we start to be worried about the violation or infringement on civil rights?
See, it depends on the state, and to give you an example, a quick example of that, look at what happened in Ohio. The governor tried to shut down the election. A local court said, you don't have the authority to do that. So then he turned to his state health director and got the health director to do it. That in that state, the governor doesn't have the authority to suspend elections, but other states, like Florida, for example, actually has a state statute that gives the governor the ability, if he declares an immediate emergency, to actually put off an election and reschedule it. So it depends on the state. I got to say, I am leery about the orders I've seen going out, particularly from city mayors and other places, shutting down restaurants and bars and other things, because I wonder, where they're getting the legal authority to do that. And certainly for the executive branch, the federal government, there are very big limitations on their ability to do that. But you know what happens, Ben, in crisis situations like this, oftentimes executive agencies, governors, and others, they act even though they don't have the legal authority to do it. And unless somebody questions it or goes to court, they're not going to be stopped.
Well, Hans, I really appreciate your time, appreciate your insight into these issues. So good news, we're still going to have an election in November. Bad news, we have no idea where these mayors are getting their authority in many cases. Hans von Spakowski, manager of the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Initiative and senior legal fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Sure, thanks for having me.
All righty, coming up, we're going to be taking your calls at 855-236-3228. That is 855-236